Welcome back, folks, to Hashtag AskGSM, the weekly Monday Mailbag video where I answer your questions from Facebook and Twitter right here in this video forum. Today's episode will be a bit different than most. I was unable to watch the Money in the Bank pay-per-view live last night on the WWE Network due to being at work, so I wanted to avoid spoilers, so I didn't go on Facebook or Twitter. So that said, I was unable to post a question asking for people's questions for today's video. I put up the question earlier today on Twitter, not Facebook. I just didn't have the time, and I'm going to Raw later, so I would if I wasn't. But because I'm going to the show later and I have to leave in a couple hours, I wanted to squeeze this video in quickly. But that being said, I did get 4 Twitter questions in response, and today's video kind of allows me to go in depth with the questions as opposed to, rushing through all the questions that I currently have. So the first question comes from @JJF Tweets. With the report that Corey Graves is done as an in-ring competitor, what role would WWE give him if he was to retire from in-ring competition? So that being said, I really hope that report is false. I would hate to see him retire from in-ring competition. The guy's so young, has so much potential. I've always seen him as a hybrid of like Jeff Hardy, CM Punk. He's had so much potential as a singles competitor since he broke away from Adrian Neville. I've been a big fan of his. So that being said, hopefully he can recover from the second concussion that he suffered over WrestleMania weekend a couple of months ago. And hopefully this is purely speculation, but if he did have to retire from in-ring competition and he did have to take up some kind of role on NXT TV or the main roster, whatever, I guess I would have to go with as a mouthpiece or a manager for someone else. I can't see him as a commentator or a backstage interviewer. His gimmick doesn't really allow for that. But that being said, though, I think he could flourish in a mouthpiece-like role for someone like someone that can't currently talk on the NXT roster. No names are coming to mind, but as a manager, I think he could flourish as a mouthpiece for someone else. I just can't see him as an announcer, someone like an Alex Riley or something like that, who does have potential to become someone bigger on the roster, who retired from in-ring competition about a year ago and started to do a lot of other things on the main roster, including being an announcer on the NXT WWE Network panels, whatever it may be. Alex Riley kind of fit the role of a commentator. It also kind of ran in the family. Corey Graves is a bit different because he has that punk-like attitude that doesn't really allow him to be a commentator or a backstage announcer or anything along those lines. But as a mouthpiece or as a manager, I think he could flourish. So that's the role that I would like to see Corey Graves in if he does indeed retire from in-ring competition, which I hope he doesn't because, as I said before, he's one of my favorites. RJ from WrestleRant Radio, my co-host, his question was, if they vacate the Intercontinental Championship due to Bad News Barrett's injury, who would you like to see? Would you like to see someone like a Bray Wyatt take the strap? Absolutely. In regards to Bad News Barrett, he suffered the injury last week at the SmackDown tapings on Tuesday, so it's been 6 days since that happened. He was taken out of the Money in the Bank ladder match, unfortunately, and what the diagnosis is on his injury, how long he'll be out for, remains to be seen. Hopefully, it won't be long. I'm a big fan of Barrett. He was finally catching his stride as Intercontinental Champion. So it'd be a shame to see him drop the championship so prematurely. But that being said, though, I don't want to see a tournament for the championship to determine a new champion or a battle royal. We've seen so much of that kind of stuff in recent months. And usually I am a big fan of tournaments, but we just saw a tournament to crown a #1 contender to the Intercontinental Championship just 2 or 3 months ago. So to hold another one to crown a new Intercontinental Champion would be a little bit too soon. So they can maybe just do a match, like a triple threat match. I don't know how you would determine who's worthy of being Intercontinental Champion. But, yeah, if they did have to take the title off of off of Bad News Barrett, giving the title to someone like a Bray Wyatt would be a great idea. Bray Wyatt, since his feud with John Cena ended, I said John Cena-Cesaro would be a great feud for the summer. What you do with Bray Wyatt, I'm not really sure. Some people have suggested a feud with Sheamus, which would be great too. I'm also a big fan of that idea going into SummerSlam. But giving him the IC Championship, I think would be great. He's high enough on the card to make the title prestigious, to give it some meaning, and to engage in a series of matches with whoever on the roster, someone like a Dolph Ziggler or maybe not a Kofi Kingston, but some face up-and-comers right now on the roster. No names come to mind quick enough, but that being said, though, I think Bray Wyatt as Intercontinental Champion would be a great idea to give him something to do for the foreseeable future. And then maybe you give the tag team titles to the Wyatt family at some point in the near future. I know they didn't win the titles at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view last night as I filmed this. Maybe they won them on Raw. I mean, who knows? But it's always possible that they could win them in a rematch on Raw, SmackDown, main event, whatever, in the next couple of weeks. And then if Bray Wyatt was to become the Intercontinental Champion, then all of the Wyatt family could have gold together. So that, yeah, I would love that idea, and hopefully we'll have to wait and see what they do with the Intercontinental Championship. And I'm speaking from like a fan point of view. As a fan of Bear, I don't want to see them strip the title from him. It depends how long he's out. If he's out for a number of months like he was the first time in 2012, then you have to take the title off him. There's no doubt about that, much like Daniel Bryan. But if he'll only be out for a month and keep the championship on him, I thought his reign was going great. The whole Bad News Barrett character is getting over, so there's no real reason to get the championship off of him if he's only going to be out for a short period of time. But in the long scheme of things, you'll be out for 4, 5, 6 months. Then yes, you will have to take the championship off of him. If there's one superstar you can give the championship to that can make it mean something, it could be a great champion. Bray Wyatt, as you said, RJ, could be that guy. At Cena Orton, N1 fan, his question was, thoughts on John Cena becoming a 15-time world champion at Money in the Bank? So, the match itself I thought was very good. Not one of the better Money in the Bank ladder matches I've seen in recent years, but it was a very good Money in the Bank ladder match. And you always got to give the guys credit for putting their bodies on the line. I mean, you could say, oh, that match sucked, that match was terrible. But I mean, just not even with Money in the Bank ladder matches, but just wrestling in general. These people are putting their bodies on the line every single night for us, for our entertainment. So you got to give it to them. You got to give that respect to those guys. But especially in Money in the Bank, because there's so many high-risk maneuvers and getting hit in the head with ladders and stuff like that. Randy Orton got busted open at one point in the match after a gruesome injury. He had to get 11 staples in his head, I believe it was, from what I read this morning. So you got to give them the respect they deserve for that. But on the result of the matchup, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't pissed because we saw it coming. Much like with the Batista Royal Rumble win, we knew it was coming, so therefore I wasn't pissed. And there was really no one else in the matchup that didn't really make much sense. Kane, maybe, if Daniel Bryan was to come back next month and win back the championship. But even then, it would be kind of a waste. So he wouldn't have made sense. Orton just lost the championship a couple of months ago. I did not want to see him hold the championship anytime soon. Sheamus is the current U.S. champion, focused on making that title relevant again. Cesaro, premature, maybe at some point down the line. Roman Reigns was a big pick to win, maybe at some point down the line. Would have marked if he won, but it was a little premature. And Bray Wyatt, same thing. And Del Rio is a freaking joke. So John Cena made the most sense. If indeed they are going to go through with Brock Lesnar taking on the champion at the SummerSlam pay-per-view, which makes the most sense. This guy just ended the freaking streak at WrestleMania when he beat The Undertaker 21-1. So he deserves a shot at the WWE World Heavyweight title. So if there's anyone that could absorb a loss, it's John Cena. And if you can recall, it was John Cena who gave Brock Lesnar his first WWE loss when he returned to the company 2 years ago. So revisiting that feud and giving Lesnar the loss that he shouldn't have taken in the first place at Extreme Rules, let the record show. But getting that win back over John Cena at the SummerSlam pay-per-view this year, I think would be great. Would be a great matchup, much like their Extreme Rules contest. Give him no DQ. It could be a hell of a contest. Cena Lesnar number 2. But I don't even know how he would give Brock Lesnar the championship. I mean, I'm a fan of the idea, but that being said, though, he's not going to work more dates. Some people have said that. I don't believe that for a second. He's not going to work house shows. You can bet your ass on that. I just don't know how he can hold the championship and have the same schedule at the same time. Maybe something will change from now until then. Maybe he loses. Hopefully that's not the case. That'd ruin any momentum he got from breaking the streak. It's really hard to say right now, but I am a fan of doing the Cena Lesnar 2 match, and that's the only real reason why I'm not pissed about Cena winning the championship. And if it's for another year-long Cena reign, then yes, I'm pissed that he's a champion for a 15th time. It just makes me cringe just saying that. You can't see it underneath the glasses, but I'm cringing when I say that John Cena is the new world champion. But I'm fine with the idea if the idea is for him to lose the title at SummerSlam to Brock Lesnar or whoever else. If it's a short-term thing, it's fine. If for the long-term, not so fine. But only time will tell. Final question comes from @Sal D'Angelo Jr. His question was, John Cena versus Daniel Bryan 2 is bound to happen, just a matter of when. When do you think, or when do you believe it will happen? And should Daniel Bryan go over again? Very good question. People have been predicting the rematch of one of the best matches of 2013 since it initially happened a year ago at SummerSlam. When Cena Bryan 2 will take place remains to be seen. I wanted it to happen at WrestleMania 30 or SummerSlam this year. But with Daniel Bryan currently out with an injury, and it doesn't look like he'll be back in the foreseeable future, especially for SummerSlam, it's definitely not Battleground. I really don't think that Daniel Bryan will be back for the August event. So therefore, Cena Bryan can't happen 1 year removed from its initial occurrence at SummerSlam. Maybe we see it as Survivor Series. It's a big time matchup. It's a money matchup. So I don't want to see it like on Night of Champions or Hell in a Cell or whatever. Save it for Survivor Series. Hell, even save it for WrestleMania 31 maybe. I think that could be great. I'm not saying that Cena should hold the championship from now until then. It doesn't even need to be a championship matchup. Maybe it's just based off a personal feud that the two still have going and that Cena wants to prove himself that he has to beat Daniel Bryan in a big time contest, in a big fight feel matchup after failing to defeat him at SummerSlam. And John Cena's always said that whenever he won the championship, his first title shot would be given to Daniel Bryan. I mean, Daniel Bryan won the championship before Cena did this year, but you know what I mean, though. So I think that could be a great contest for WrestleMania 31, much like John Cena and Batista. Those two had their first ever matchup at SummerSlam 08. Year and a half later, they had their rematch at WrestleMania 26. So, like with Cena and Bryan, they had their first match at SummerSlam 2013. Year and a half later, rematch at WrestleMania 31 for the championship. With the championship on the line, without it on the line, doesn't really matter, in my personal opinion. But the match is going to be great. In regard to the second part of your question, should Daniel Bryan go over again? Very good idea. Very good question, I should say. Yes, I think so. I don't really think Cena has much to gain from beating Daniel Bryan. And there really isn't anyone that comes to mind that John Cena hasn't beaten, like he's lost to before, then hasn't beaten in a rematch, like a CM Punk. Is a perfect example. He lost to CM Punk at the 2011 Money in the Bank and SummerSlam pay-per-views, but Cena would go on to defeat CM Punk, I think maybe a number of weeks later on Raw, or a couple of pay-per-views in 2012 too. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I don't think John Cena needs to beat Daniel Bryan. I would just leave it as is. But if they face off in a rematch, I wouldn't be pissed with John Cena winning, but I just don't feel it's necessary. And Daniel Bryan can win clean once again. I know that's kind of stretching it a little bit, but that's just the way I would book it. It depends on who's the champion, who's the challenger, when it is, where it is. It all really depends on the factors going into the contest, who should go over. But in a perfect world, an ideal scenario, I would have Daniel Bryan go over again. Maybe that's just the smark in me, but I just honestly don't think Daniel Bryan, or John Cena that is, has much to prove at this stage in his career. So that's going to do it for today's hashtag AskJSM video. Once again, my apologies for not sending out the weekly question on the Facebook page. I just had a very busy Sunday night and Monday with today I'm going to Monday Night Raw. Work last night, watching the Money in the Bank pay-per-view today and the WWE Network on replay. So really hectic last few days, so I apologize for not getting all of your questions in. Just the 4 that I was asked today on Twitter as of Monday, June 30th. But that being said, that we will be returning to the regular program, so to speak, the regular lineup next week. And we'll be asking the people on Facebook and Twitter for their questions over the course of the weekend. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And also next week will mark the 1-year anniversary of this show, as I believe the first, was it 1 year? Yes, it has been 1 year, as it was on, I think, July 10th, I want to say. No, July 9th, 2013, that I aired the first ever episode of hashtag AskJSM right here on the channel. So we'll be celebrating that special anniversary next week. But until then, if you want to send in a question, make sure to find me on Facebook at GrahamGSMMatthews. Leave a comment on the wall, or as I said before, leave a comment on the Facebook post that I usually put up on Sunday nights. Tweet me on Twitter with the hashtag AskJSM at WrestleRant, or you can even leave a comment down below on this video. I'll be sure to include it in next week's edition. That all being said, thanks for watching, guys. Always appreciate it. This is GrahamGSMMatthews. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys down the road.